Hello, Bible in a Year family. Pastor Kevin with our old pal Jason Upton again. This is episode 166, and we're looking at Psalm 91 through 101 as you're reading today. And we are going to hone in on Psalm 91. We'll look at it as a whole. But yeah, this is just such a well-known scripture. We couldn't not look at Psalm 91. Let's do this thing. Hey Jay, what's going on today, buddy?
Hey, just enjoying my time with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. How great is Psalm 91?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's in my top 10 Psalms for sure.
Yeah, it's so amazing. You know, there's a song that is sung in Catholic tradition that I just love, and it follows Psalm 91. It pretty much just sings the whole psalm, and every time I hear that song, I don't know, just does something to me. I think it's just called "On Eagle's Wings" or something like that. But such a beautiful psalm. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Where do we begin with this? My goodness, the question, I mean, I could ask 500 questions about this, but here's the question in our preparation for our discussion today that I sent you, that will be really the focus of what we're talking about today, guys. How did Jesus trust in the Father's protection? So much of Psalm 91 is the protection of the Father, especially during his temptation in the wilderness. And how can we take refuge in him? You know, I mean, I'll hold your thought there for 1 second. On Sunday morning when I was preaching, I was talking much about this. You know, 2 Christmases ago, I had severe double pneumonia in flu A and was so sick. That next spring of 24, I find out I have 100% blockage going to the circumflex artery, the artery that feeds the back of the heart. 100% blockage, required 2 stents. And then, it may seem minor, and I know a lot of people have been through it, but last week I had a little minor surgery here on the side of my face. I had squamous cell carcinoma removed. Boom, 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 all within an 18-month, period. And for me, I look at this question, how did Jesus trust in the Father's protection, especially during his temptation in the wilderness? And how can we take refuge like him? I think there's such a message to be told about Jesus, but even in our own lives, when double pneumonia comes and you sit straight up for 11 days because you can't lie down to sleep. When you're on a treadmill and the nurse practitioner goes, "Oh," and the next thing you know, a week later, you're on the table getting 2 stents put in that artery. And then you think everything's fine when you have a mole removed from your jawline, and you get a call back that says you got to come back in. You're waiting on the doctor's call. What will the call? I want to think they say, "Hey, we got it all," but you don't know. How do you take refuge in God? All right, that's a very long question. Where are you on all of this, especially from the context, obviously, of Psalm 91?
Well, I would say, one, with the life of Jesus, we learn how to be a real man by watching Jesus. And we live in a culture that says if you're a real man, you can beat everybody. You can beat everybody. You can beat everybody up. You can protect yourself. You can protect everybody. You can, But the life of Jesus, you don't see that kind of representation or manifestation of manhood. You see, vulnerability. He was willing to be silent in the midst of his enemies and those that were speaking ill of him. He was willing to wait upon the Lord to renew his strength. He was willing to to wait on the Lord in the midst of his enemies when it looked as though his enemies were winning. He was willing to look like he was losing. We don't ever allow ourselves to lose. I always say to Oliver, and when we're playing tennis, I always say, some young boy can't handle losing, so he throws his racket and crashes it on the ground. I always say you'll never be a champion if you don't know how to lose, right? And so one of the ways I see Jesus is he teaches us how to be fully a real man, and a real man knows how to trust his Father for all protection, and isn't trying to protect oneself. And you see that in his relationships, and he's not, some guys, it's like they're so tough, but they kind of like act like paranoid, orphans, of just like somebody's always going to take advantage of me if I'm not protecting myself. No, Jesus lives his life very generously. Because he's not trying to hold on to everything and protect himself. He knows that his Father is his protection. He doesn't have to prove himself to everyone. He doesn't have to prove himself to his own disciples. You don't get the sense that he's trying to prove his holiness or his purity or how good he is or whether he's the right kind of Messiah for them. Right? There, you don't get that sense, and that's a lot of our manhood, is trying to prove ourselves and trying to be self-sufficient and independent, and can you protect yourself, and can you defend yourself? No, real manhood, it looks like Jesus. You let the Father defend you, right? And that's a different way of living, to let God defend me, to let God be my defense. And I would just tell one story about that happened for me when I was younger. I was reminded of this, looking at this, that we were living in a house in Shorewood, Wisconsin, and it was early on, and I was traveling a bit for ministry, and Rachel had some dreams. And whenever Rachel gets dreams, it's always usually pretty prophetic, and she had these dreams that the wolves were surrounding our house. It was a wild dream one night. And I came back from a traveling trip, and Rachel was kind of alerted to that and was praying. And Samuel, he's 24 now. He was just a little guy. And he woke up crying in the middle of the night. And Rachel went into the room, and I just gotten home, and Rachel went into the room, and she came downstairs and with Samuel, and she said, "Jay, you need to go up into the room. There's like something spiritually is going on." And I walked up into that room, and I could feel the presence of something dark. And, I was a young father, and I was probably getting a little arrogant, and, a little bit of pride creeps in, and you want to be the head, and you want to be, it's just insecurity is what it is. And maybe had lost sight of the Lord is my protection. The Lord is our shelter. I'm trying to build a shelter now. I'm trying to be the protector. I'm a young father. And that's a natural thing to a certain degree. But as I walked into that room, something came over me. And it was like a holy wisdom from above that I absolutely didn't have as a 29-year-old. And it came over me, and I said, I don't know who you are. I don't know what your name is. This is exactly what came out of my mouth. I don't know who you are, and I don't know what your name is, and I don't want to know. But I think there's been, maybe by my own actions, a misunderstanding. I think by my own actions, maybe you've thought that I think that I'm the head of this house, that I'm the master of this location. But I want you to know, and I literally got down on my knees. I'm not the head of this house, and I'm not the master of the location that I'm in. I say right now out loud, Jesus is Lord of this house. And I'm going to submit right now openly in front of you that Jesus is the Lord of this house, and he's the leader, and he's the head, and I submit to his way. Before those words even came out of my mouth, it was gone. The kids all know this. Rachel knows this. Every house we've ever entered, that's what I pray over every room of the house. From that moment forward, and from that moment forward, among our kids, when I've acted out of pride as a dad or as a husband, or said stupid things that I shouldn't be saying, or didn't know about it anyway, I try to be quick to repent in front of everyone, especially if I've done something publicly. Because I don't have to be right. I just have to be submitted to the one who's right, to the one who's Lord. I don't have to be the most powerful, right? I just have to admit my need for God for everything. And that's where my power really comes from. And it's been unbelievable through the years how few times we've had nightmares in our houses. How few times our kids have had disturbed sleep. You've come and rested at our home. I just don't play around with that. Make the Lord your shelter. And how do we do this? By saying it out loud. I'm not the master of my own house. The Lord is. And I'm submitted to him. And we make the Lord our refuge. No evil can come. No evil can come and mess with anything. When we play with it, when we play around with who's the authority and who's not the authority, and maybe I'm the authority or whatever, that's like, the enemy's not that scared of that stuff. He's not scared of me having all the authority. But man, he's really scared of a submitted son or daughter to the master. He's terrified. And when the master rules over the place where you dwell, your sleep will be sweet. And so that was my thought for today.
That's powerful, man. It's funny when you're talking about that. All I can think about is that the final temptation that Satan gives is Psalm 91. He'll command his angels concerning you to guard you in all of your ways. Jump down. Be the master of your own house. The cross is not the house that you are to go to. Show them in pride. Show them in arrogance who you are. And then you take the temple temptation and move it a few city blocks over to Calvary, and that it's the same temptation. If you are who you say you are, be the master of your house and come down. And he never comes down. He never comes down. He lets the Father be. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That is so big. Goodness, man. I got to think about that one. I know it's true, but I got to think about this.
And when we look back at some of the other things, maybe it should have entered in some of those conversations of earlier Psalms here, but, in the last couple of days. But I heard that years ago. I don't remember who taught me that, but it's not my own thought of divine limitation. But freedom equals acceptance of divine limitation. Freedom equals acceptance of divine limitation, meaning I am not who I say I am. I am who God says I am. And recognizing my own limitations, right, brings freedom to my life. And so I'm not saying at all to those that are listening that I'm not responsible in my household.
No, I don't think anybody should take it that
No,
way at all.
no. And you know me, you've been to my home.
Sure.
I'm just saying, in my responsibilities, I want to lead people to the true master. And when we do that, the enemy has no foothold.
Whew.
Right? It's just gone.
Man, can I tell you something? And I'm not going to drop my guard completely. You and I were talking on the phone yesterday about an issue that I'm going to start crying.
Yeah.
You and I were talking about an issue yesterday that I'm dealing with in my own life. And when you were talking, I thought, when we're done recording these podcasts today, I need to go upstairs to the sanctuary and I need to pray this. I need to pray this. Because, Jay, I've like I said, I'm 54 years old, almost 55. I've been pastoring since I was 20 years old. 34 years this August. I will have been pastoring. And as much as I want to try to say that I'm living this humble life where, the Lord if the Lord doesn't build the church, the laborers labor in vain. I believe that. But it's what you said. Every once in a while, that arrogance slips in. That egotism slips in. That hubris slips in. And I think every once in a while, we just need to go to the sanctuary and just restate, I am not the Lord of this house. You are, God. I think every once in a while, we just need to pray that prayer, Wow, that's huge. Man, thank you for this today. This is big.
I love you, Kevin. That's great.
I love you too. All right, guys, thanks for joining us today. That's a big one today. All right, guys. We're going to be back tomorrow. Jay's going to be with us again. We're going to talk, I'm looking down at my list, Psalm 102 through 106 tomorrow. I'm going to focus in on Psalm 103 verses 1 and 2. But boy, I got a lot to think about until then. Hey, guys, God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow.